40, 50 feet. Why don't you turn around and let them get a view from there and see what the field of view looks like. We're backing into the cable. Okay.
In 1969, the world watched in awe as mankind took its first steps on another world. Or so we were told. Neil Armstrong stepped onto the surface of the moon. A dream realized.
That we shall send to the moon 240,000 miles away from the control station in Houston, a giant rocket more than 300 feet tall, the length of this football field, made of new metal alloys, some of which have not yet been invented, capable of standing heat and stresses several times more than have ever been experienced, fitted together with a precision better than the finest watch, carrying all the equipment needed for propulsion, guidance, control, communications, food, and survival, on an untried mission to an unknown celestial body, and then return it safely to Earth, re-entering the atmosphere at speeds of over 25,000 miles per hour, causing heat about half that on the temperature of the sun, almost as hot as it is here today, and do all this, and do all this, and do it right, and do it first before this decade is out, then we must be bold.
In the ashes of World War II, a new battle ignited. The United States and the Soviet Union, once uneasy allies, turned into bitter rivals, clawing for dominance beyond the skies. Espionage was at its peak. Secrets were currency from the wreckage of Hitler's fallen Reich. Both powers scrambled to seize the future. Stolen scientists, shattered technologies, pieces of forbidden knowledge, all hidden in the ruins. This was the true beginning of the space race, a race where winning wasn't everything.
Grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder down there. It's very fine. And now step off the limb. It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. That's beautiful, Daniel. It has a stark beauty all its own.
A war won. But what if the whole thing was staged? What if, in a rush for power, prestige, and political dominance, a lie of cosmic proportions was broadcast to every television on Earth? This is not a story about the stars. It's a story about shadows, about silence, about questions that were never answered, until now. The space race, a Cold War battlefield above the clouds. After Sputnik, America found itself humiliated. The Soviet Union had bested them in orbit, in manned flight, and propaganda. The moon was to be the American redemption arc. But behind the curtain, there were whispers. Whispers of an impossible deadline. Technology unproven. Deadlines unmovable. And an administration that needed a win at any cost.
And your chest is open. What do you want to see in the eyes of the doctor there? Failure is not an option. So I think this is the kind of relationship that we must have.
who are attempting to make a determination of which road they should take. Since early in my term, our efforts in space have been under review. With the advice of the Vice President, who is Chairman of the National Space Council, we have examined where we are strong and where we are not, where we may succeed and where we may not. Now it is time to take longer strides, time for a great new American enterprise, time for this nation to take a clearly leading role in space achievement, which in many ways may hold the key to our future on Earth. I believe we possess all the resources and talents necessary, but the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. We have never specified long-range goals on an urgent time schedule or managed our resources and our time so as to ensure their fulfillment. I therefore ask the Congress, above and beyond the increases I have earlier requested for space activities, to provide the funds which are needed to meet the following national goals. First, I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space...
Kennedy's bold promise was a political chess move. The moon landing wasn't science, it was strategy. And when you can't afford to lose, you lie. The Saturn V rocket was a marvel. Towering, deafening, precise. Or so we're told. But where is the technology today?
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons, and then after that, Mars, maybe a high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
Excuse me, we destroyed the technology? The most celebrated engineering feat in human history scrapped, lost, forgotten? Is that the behavior of a pioneering space agency or the cover story of a magic trick that must never be repeated? Today, the International Space Station floats just 250 miles above Earth. We haven't gone beyond it in over 50 years. NASA's own Artemis mission is years behind schedule. But in 1969, with slide rulers and duct tape, we nailed it. Today, with supercomputers and AI, we can't go beyond low Earth orbit. Back then, they navigated by the stars. Today, we rely on satellites we can't escape. In 1969, they left footprints on the moon. Now, we leave footprints in the cloud. Back in the Apollo era, they reached the moon with technology that today seems almost laughable. No black boxes. No real telemetry systems linking mission control to the spacecraft the way we would expect today. Just simple radio signals. And trust the computers? Primitive beyond imagination. The Apollo guidance computer had less processing power than a cheap digital watch today, 64 kilobytes of memory. Less than the photo you just snapped on your phone. And yet, they crossed 250,000 miles of deadly space and came back. Today's rockets with all their technological polish, all their artificial intelligence, cannot reach beyond low Earth orbit. They are tethered to our planet. Like kites in a windstorm, the Apollo missions were analog dreams stitched together by engineers with slide rules, not algorithms. In 1969, they left footprints in lunar dust. Today, we leave hashtags in the cloud.
Okay, Houston, the Sim running pretty smooth today. Affirmative, Pete.
Between Earth and the Moon lies an invisible killer, the Van Allen radiation belts. Zones of intense radiation that wrap the Earth in a deadly embrace. Scientists warned that safe passage was virtually impossible without heavy shielding. The dose of radiation an unshielded astronaut would receive passing through would be fatal over the course of the journey. The European Space Agency notes that 1 day in space is equivalent to the radiation received on Earth for a whole year, emphasizing the heightened exposure astronauts face beyond low Earth orbit.
We are headed 3,600 miles above Earth, 15 times higher from the planet than the International Space Station. As we get further away from Earth, we'll pass through the Van Allen belts, an area of dangerous radiation. Radiation like this could harm the guidance systems, onboard computers, or other electronics on Orion. Naturally, we have to pass through this danger zone twice, once up and once back. But Orion has protection. Shielding will be put to the test as the vehicle cuts through the waves of radiation. Sensors aboard will record radiation levels for scientists to study. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space. For this flight, it's time to head home. We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space.
NASA engineer Kelly Smith, working on the Orion project, says, "We must solve these challenges before we send people through this region of space." Orion's mission, the project mentioned, is unmanned. They're sending robots through first because the radiation is a known serious risk. If the belts weren't a problem, they'd send people immediately, just like Apollo allegedly did. If Van Allen radiation was the dangerous and current NASA admits it is, and if modern technology still struggles to safely shield humans from it, then claiming humans safely flew through it. Today's NASA engineers say passing the Van Allen belts is an unsolved challenge. 50 years ago, men supposedly crossed it with tin can spacecraft and lived to tell the tale. Something doesn't add up. So what protected our brave men? Thin aluminum foil? A dream? NASA now admits that we still need to solve the radiation problem before sending humans beyond Earth's orbit again. But in 1969, they didn't just solve it, they ignored it. The footage that inspired generations may be more science fiction than science. The shadows, mismatched. The light, artificial. The flag, waving. In space. Released 1 year before the moon landing, Kubrick's film showed realistic zero-gravity scenes, moon landscapes, even astronauts with NASA-like gear. Rumors swirled for decades that he didn't just film a movie. He filmed the moon landing itself.
Stanley Kubrick was a master of light. Every frame he crafted was deliberate, controlled. Shadows obeyed, highlights were balanced. Scenes braided with an eerie precision that only the eye of a master could conjure. Now, when you turn to the Apollo photographs, something feels off. Like if you know what you're looking at, you see hot spots, bright glare and reflection in strange places. You can see multiple shadows cast in opposing directions, as if from several light sources. Sunlight is like too clean, too diffuse in some frames, too harsh and isolated in others. Not the cruel, unforgiving light of an airless moon. It's like the flattering, soft illumination of a carefully dressed soundstage. You see studio-grade fill light smoothing textures, eliminating the abyssal blackness of true shadows. You see reflections in visors, in the LAM's panels, suspiciously man-made, and we can say it's a chaos, it's a nature. No, we can't say that. It's an obvious design. When you understand how Kubrick worked and how he manipulated light not to show but to suggest, you start asking dangerous questions about what really lit those iconic scenes on the moon.
And let's not forget the live transmission from the moon in 1969. Somehow, with 1,960 seconds technology, they broadcast a television signal from over 200,000 miles away without delay, without distortion. Today, we drop calls on Earth. In 1969, they streamed from the moon. How convenient. In space, there is no atmosphere, no diffusion of light, yet shadows behave like on Earth. And then there's this duplicate backgrounds reused in different missions, crosshairs behind objects instead of over them. The anomalies are more than mere glitches. They whisper of staging, of deception of a performance designed not for discovery, but for dominance. Shadows falling in opposing directions, as if lit by spotlights on a soundstage. A flag fluttering in a vacuum where wind should be as dead as the moon's surface itself. And the greatest mystery of all, the missing tapes. The original recordings of mankind's giant leap lost, erased, like an inconvenient secret. Was it really one small step for man? Or the first step in a lie too big to walk back? Welcome to the biggest hoax in history. Were the moon photos shot on the moon? Or in a studio with a matte backdrop and a Hollywood budget?
40 years ago today, 3 astronauts blasted off from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. They were beginning the historic Apollo 11 mission, the first manned voyage ever to reach the surface of the moon.
That's one small step for man,
One giant leap for mankind. Hundreds of millions of people watched on television as Neil Armstrong took that first step. But the pictures that people saw were dark and fuzzy. The astronauts actually sent back better images, higher quality footage that was recorded by engineers on Earth. But 3 years ago, NPR reported that those original tapes were missing. Our report helped to trigger an exhaustive search by NASA. And NPR's Nell Greenfield-Boyce recently got an exclusive sneak peek at the 1969 moonwalk like you have never seen it before.
Stan LeBar is almost 84 years old. Decades ago, he led a team that designed and built a TV camera that is currently on the moon, right where the Apollo 11 astronauts left it. LeBar says his camera actually captured better images of their moonwalk than people saw on TV.
It was better. We knew it was better.
But the lunar camera recorded in an odd format that was incompatible with the normal TV format. So when the footage was received on Earth, it had to be converted for broadcast. That conversion degraded the image. However, engineers on the ground did record the unconverted raw footage onto tapes. LeBar and some colleagues recently decided to go back and look at those tapes.
The whole thing started with the idea that this is the one piece of television footage that's going to be played for the next 50 or 100 or 300 years. Those that follow us deserve better than what we had.
But the tapes were missing. For the last 3 years, a monumental search has been underway.
We had hundreds and hundreds of leads coming to us during this period. Every one of them was investigated.
LeBar and other searchers spent hours and hours in a vast government storage facility known as the Washington National Records Center, something that sounds like the giant warehouse at the end of the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Stacked with racks of documents, tapes, all kinds of things from NASA and other agencies.
Dick Knapsker is a TV specialist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. He became the unofficial leader of the search team. He says they also went to remote storage facilities, to private homes. They pored over logbooks and memos and all kinds of 40-year-old handwritten records.
We went through old file cabinets that would have little record cards and give you an idea if a shipment went in with the name Apollo on it, and did it have Apollo or tape, or did it have anything on there that could be a tape.
They returned again and again to that vast government warehouse, but then they discovered something disturbing. Over the years, NASA had removed massive numbers of magnetic tapes from the shelves. Between 1981 to 1983, NASA permanently withdrew over 40,000 boxes. Why? LeBar says new satellites had gone up. The satellites were producing a lot of data that needed to be recorded.
These satellites were suddenly using tapes 7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
And the agency was experiencing a critical shortage of magnetic tapes. So, NASA started erasing old ones and reusing them. That's probably what happened to the original footage from the moon that the astronauts took with LeBar's camera.
So I don't believe that the tapes exist today at all.
I mean, are you sad about that?
Yeah. Well, it was a hard thing to accept, but there was just an overwhelming amount of evidence that led us to believe that they just don't exist anymore. And you have to accept reality.
You may have to accept reality, but that doesn't mean you have to give in to it. Knapsker says, look, they started this search with one goal.
Our goal was to provide to the world the best possible video of a historic event we could for the future.
Since the raw footage was gone, the team decided to try to find the best of what was preserved in the converted broadcast format. Knapsker says they looked through tapes in Australia, tapes in the CBS News archive, stuff no one had looked at in decades.
We found immediately that just because it was broadcast didn't mean it was similar quality. The quality of broadcast TV in existence of 1969 broadcast TV was varied extremely between sources.
Using all of these sources, they pieced together the best possible version of the moonwalk. And then, to make it even better, they turned to the magic of Hollywood.
We had been in contact at that point with a company called Lowry Digital in California.
They contacted me at Lowry Digital here in Burbank with the objective of can this material be restored?
John Lowry has a lot of experience doing high-quality digital restorations of old films.
Such as Old Bambi, Cinderella, Lady and the Tramp, 20 James Bond movies.
And the Star Wars films, just to name a few. Early in his career, Lowry had actually worked on footage from later Apollo missions. So he was excited to have the chance to work on the first moonwalk. Over 100 computers processed the images, carefully removing things like random noise and camera shake, without destroying the image's historical legitimacy.
We've got to be very, very mindful of history. If you want to go to the extreme, you could take these images and completely recreate them. You could create a three-dimensional model of the lunar lander, and you could make it look beautiful, but I don't think that's the point. I think the point is that Apollo 11 was a very, very special historical event.
Last week at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, Dick Nafzger sat down at a computer loaded with the restored video, which he just received from California the day before. He called up a side-by-side comparison of the old and new. On the left side of his monitor was the dark, murky footage of Neil Armstrong coming down the ladder of his LEM spacecraft, about to make his first step.
As you can see on the left, there's nothing but a dark image and possibly a foot. If I told you it was a foot, you'd probably say, okay, it must be a foot.
On the right hand of his screen was the new version.
You can see the structure of the limb. You can see his full outline of his body. His helmet, a reflection in his helmet. It's so not pristine, it's not clean in detail, but it's now an astronaut, and it's something no one saw before. This is the first step on the moon.
The restoration won't be complete until the fall, but NASA is releasing some short clips today to mark the 40th anniversary of Apollo 11 blasting off of Earth towards its moment in history. Nell Greenfield-Boyce, NPR News.
Anytime you're in front of a computer today, you can see the restored video of the moonwalk by going to npr.org.
Picture it. July 1969. Humanity's first steps on the moon, captured by a specially designed lunar camera. This camera recorded in a unique slow-scan format, incompatible with standard broadcast television. To share the moment with the world, the footage was converted in real time, resulting in the grainy, ghostly images we all know. Yet, the original, high-quality recordings were preserved on magnetic tapes, offering a crisper, more detailed view of this monumental event. But then, like a misfiled dream, those tapes vanished. Fast forward to the early 2000s, when engineers like Stan Libar and Dick Nafzger embarked on a quest to recover these pristine recordings. Their search led them through NASA's vast archives, reminiscent of the endless warehouse in Raiders of the Lost Ark, filled with forgotten relics of the past. Their efforts culminated in a sobering revelation. During the 1980s, facing a shortage of magnetic tapes, NASA had erased and reused thousands of them, including the Apollo 11 originals. The very tapes that held humanity's first lunar footsteps were likely overwritten with satellite data, lost to time and oversight. In 2006, NASA acknowledged that the original Stevie slow-scan television tapes of the Apollo 11 moonwalk were likely erased and reused in the 1980s due to a shortage of data tapes. NASA admits they lost the original moon landing tapes. Gone, erased, reused. The most important footage in human history, deleted to save money on videotape.
You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're coming into this corner.
Armstrong is on the moon. Neil Armstrong, 38-year-old American, standing on the surface of the moon. On this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Oh, that looks beautiful from here, Neil. It has a stark beauty all its own. It's like much of the high desert of the United States. It's different, but it's very pretty out here. Beautiful view. Isn't that something? Magnificent sight out here. Magnificent desolation.
Tranquility Base, Houston. Guidance recommendation is pings, and you're cleared for takeoff.
Roger, understand. We're number 1 on the runway. 7, 6, 5, engine arm ascent. Beautiful. Very smooth. Very quiet ride.
These men had just completed the greatest journey ever undertaken. Yet they looked like they were attending a funeral. Why? The mood is somber, their faces blank, their voices flat. No elation, no pride, no wonder. These weren't the expressions of men who had just danced on the lunar surface. They looked like they'd seen a ghost. Or were hiding one. Neil Armstrong, the first man to walk on the moon, avoids eye contact, folds inward, speaks in rehearsed monotone. Buzz Aldrin, decorated pilot and second man on the moon, sits rigid, arms clenched, eyes darting. He fidgets like a man under interrogation.
We progressed with a gradual power-up of the lunar module, which included another star alignment up in front of the instrument panel that was used to record the various messages that were sent up to us, the whole host of numbers for the particular maneuvers that were coming up that we would copy down. We'd log these on that sort of a data sheet.
This film shows our final look at Tranquility Base before our departure. And we're ready now for question and answers, and wait for the microphone, and we'll go right down the line, and we'll catch everyone if you'll just be patient. Tom will too.
How much time did you have left in your life support backpacks at the time you got back on board LEM?
I haven't seen the post-flight analysis of the numbers. We had roughly half of our available oxygen supply remaining in the backpacks, and somewhat less percentage in the water supplies, which is used for cooling. Of course, particularly on our first experience with the use of that backpack on the lunar surface, we were interested in conserving a good bit of margin in case we had difficulty with closing the hatch or repressurizing the LEM, or had any difficulties with getting the systems operating again in the normal fashion inside the cockpit. They hope to accomplish.
I have two brief questions I'd like to ask, if I may. When you were carrying out that incredible moonwalk, did you find that the surface was equally firm anywhere, or were there harder and softer spots that you could detect? And secondly, when you looked up at the sky, could you actually see the stars and the solar corona in spite of the glare?
In rather flat regions, the footprint would penetrate perhaps a half an inch or sometimes only a quarter of an inch and gave a very firm response. In other regions near the edges of these craters, we could find that the foot would sink down maybe 2, 3, possibly 4 inches. And in the slope, of course, the various edges of the footprint might go on up to 6 or 7 inches. And
no awe, Just tension, discomfort, and a haunting absence of joy. Where are the triumphant smiles, the heartfelt stories, the fire of human achievement? What exactly were these men struggling to say, or trying so hard not to? Bill Kaysing, once a technical writer for Rocketdyne, dared to voice doubts and was met with ridicule. His claims, though controversial, sparked a movement of inquiry.
Is that the astronomy buffs at Vanderbilt or Harvard or UCSC would have found the errors instantly.
It's random, the person who spoke with them here.
Right. Do you want me to mention him by name?
I think so.
Okay, why not? Of course, Lee is kind of a reclusive person, but I don't mind mentioning his name. We can't live forever.
All right.
Ready?
Yeah.
James Irwin was the command pilot on Apollo 15. James, after his return from the moon, became a born-again Christian. At one point, he came to Nashville, Tennessee, to give a lecture on Christianity and his conversion there, too. And at that time, he met a local Nashville resident by the name of Lee Galvani. Well, Lee implored James Irwin to confess, to tell the truth about the Apollo hoax, of which Lee was convinced. Well, evidently, he made some inroads into Jim Irwin's conscience, because in August of 1991, James Irwin called me at my home. And he said, I understand you've written a book called We Never Went to the Moon. He says, come to think of it, this phone could be tapped. He says, I want you to call me at my home on Friday in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I said, okay, Jim, I'll call you. And he gave me his home phone number. Well, when I called him on Friday, James Irwin was dead. He had died of a heart attack.
Tell me about the pilot who phoned in one of your guest appearances on the talk radio program.
Oh. While I was on a radio show concerning Apollo, an airline pilot called me and he said, Bill, I think you're right, because while I was traveling from San Francisco to Tokyo, we saw a C-5A drop a capsule out of its cargo hold. The three orange parachutes opened, and it descended toward the ocean. And even though we were traveling at about 550 knots, we followed this descent as long as we could. When the command capsule returns to Earth, the atmosphere causes it to become red hot due to friction at high speed. Well, when a command capsule strikes an ocean, which is about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, this red-hot capsule should have turned a large volume of seawater into steam instantly. Just like when you pour water into a hot pot on the stove, it's called flashing into steam. But in all of the photographs showing the capsule hitting the water, there's no indication whatsoever of any steam, of any indication that the capsule was really red hot. On December 7th, 1975, I was invited to discuss my book at radio station KOME in San Jose, California. The moderator or talk show host was Victor Bach. About halfway through the broadcast, the engineer came into the control room, or the room where we were giving our information, and he said, "We're off the air." Subsequent investigation indicated that someone in a helicopter had dropped napalm on the KOME transmitter in the Gilroy Hills, causing $250,000 worth of damage and effectively cutting off the station from the air for 3 days. Well, police came to the station and offered us police protection because callers into the station said, "What happened to you? You had this fellow on about we never went to the moon, and suddenly your radio station goes off the air." So to me, this was the first real-life indication that there was somebody that didn't want me to tell this story.
Ralph Wren, challenging the feasibility of the missions, highlighted concerns about radiation and spacecraft shielding. His technical arguments were largely ignored by mainstream discourse.
Yeah. Okay. Roland, just tell me about your background, whatever they called you in the book, and how you're affiliated or got affiliated with NASA, etc.
I think the question really is, how did I get involved in this great big mess?
Okay.
And it's simple. This book is glossy, full size, a lot of pages. It's called America at the Threshold, and it's put out by the Superintendent of Documents. It's a government publication. And about 3 years before I received this, which is a good 6-7 years ago now, the Rand Corporation wrote me a nice sweet little letter, and it said, "Oh, please, Mr. Bright Inventor," and words to that effect. I was a member of Mensa at the time. I have patents. If you have any free ideas for space, please send them to NASA. So I did. I sent them a few. I don't know how many. I kept no records. Well, I started to get a little bit miffed at them because they had never responded and said, "Thanks for your submission." Nothing. Time went on. We moved from Florida. We came up to Port Richey at first. That's in Florida. And then we moved north. And I believe I was up here when it was forwarded from the Port Richey address, maybe 3 months. And I get this thing and I look at it and I say, "I wonder why I got this." And I look and then I see it's a tout for Mars. For NASA taking everybody to Mars. Well, by the time I got this, which was quite a few years after they had requested the information, I was on the verge of saying there's something wrong here, because I would be looking at my TV and you'd see that flag salute ceremony, which they did every time they went up. That was a repetitious deal. And on one of them, every once in a while, I would see the flag ripple. Now, the moon is a vacuum. There are no air currents. How could the flag ripple? So that, and it was never on long enough to be sure, and they played all 6 or 7 of the landings, so you only saw it once every blue moon. But the other thing I got to looking at was the rover. They would hit the pedal and the thing would take off and the wheels would spin and dust and gravel would fly. And the problem was that the dust and gravel hit the moon's surface just as quick as it would have here on Earth. My generation was the hot rod generation. Every red light was a go flag. You know, we were in a race. So I saw a lot of dirt and gravel spitting around. And that started to wear on me. And then, of course, I saw, I believe it was in the Inquirer, an article about Bill Casing. And that started to make me wonder even more. So when I received this thing, as I read through it, I found my name on page A51, right in the center of the page. And it was put there because at least one of my ideas had passed 3 or 4 sequential screening committees. Which idea? I don't know. They didn't tell me. But the context of this entire book is that the people who contributed were boosters of NASA going to Mars. And by this time, I was very shaky that we had even gone to the moon. And I got mad. I mean, I got mad. Who the hell do they think they are? So I took a magnifying glass and I began to look at the pictures in this book. There's quite a few of them. There's artwork and sketches, but there's also actual pictures. And I started to see things that were very strange. The background always starts right after the object of interest. But in real life, your background is in perspective. It just goes on out there. And on these pictures, it always starts right now, suggesting a grade Z movie backdrop. And I looked and I looked and I looked. And I went out and I ordered some pictures from NASA, pictures I had seen other places, and I began to take books out of the library, books written by the astronauts. And I read with a very critical eye, and I started to dissect them. And I was going, One of the things that leaped out pretty quick, I can't remember the book it's in now. I have it all footnoted in my book, which of course is NASA Mooned America. And what happened is, as they landed on the moon in this metallic contraption, which was sitting there, and they claim it was early lunar morning, so the sun was low on the horizon. But when you have a thing on an open plane and the sun hits it, in the morning it hits it at right angles because it's low. And immediately that thing begins to heat from the solar radiation. And they claimed that they couldn't even sleep in this metallic contraption in a place where the sun will drive the soil temperature up to 250 degrees. Okay? Now, because they were cold. See, they were too cold to sleep. And I'm looking at this and saying, how could that be? So one day I did my famous weenie experiment. I took a frozen hot dog right out of the freezer, went to the oven, put the hot dog in, turned the dial to 250. 20 minutes later, I opened it up to see how it was doing. It was cooked, so I ate it. But the astronauts complained that they were too cold to even sleep in a metallic oven and the full-bore sunlight of the moon. So one thing led to another. I also found books written by ex-government scientists, one of whom very definitely states that there's a radiation problem out in space, that whenever that sun throws a little fit, a little solar storm, that the amount of radiation is vast and immense, and that you would need 6 feet of shielding all around you, because X-rays do what they call diffract, to keep you alive from even a medium solar storm, or even a little one for that matter, solar flare, solar storm. So I took a very jaundiced look at the thing, and I began to write. It was not a book, it was more, what's the word I'm looking for, Bart? A report, that's a good word. Yeah, and I began to write more of a report because I wanted to forward it to Ross Perot, as he was ostensibly running for president at the time. I never did get through to him. But in the meantime, that report expanded and expanded, and one day it was book-sized, and I decided to publish. And I began sending feelers out, which I had been through before with my other books, and it seems nobody's interested. So I finally self-published it, and here we sit today.
Tell me a bit about your background. Like, do you have a degree in anything? Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? How did you become interested and scientifically minded and all that stuff?
Well, I went to my share of schools, and I found that if you're not a rote learner, which I most definitely am not, that it's very difficult it's not doing the work, that's easy. It's very difficult to put up with the stuff that the academics throw at you. They want rote learners. I do mine by logic. They do theirs by some expert said, and that's all they know. So basically, I got out of college pretty quick, and I went to work, and I've worked at just about every job known to man. And in 1966 or 67, I picked up a book by Hugh Auchincloss Brown called Cataclysms of the Earth. And I read a few pages and threw the book at a wall. And I'm not a book abuser. But what the man had said was so astounding to me that I just, reacted. Ah! And a few days later, after thinking it over, and of course I was a bachelor at the time, so the book laid where it hit the ground, I came home, had nothing else to do, and I picked up the book again because I had thought, well, yeah, the Earth could be accumulating mass. He claims that we accumulate mass, that the solar energy hits the tree leaves, and when they die, there's a little bit more mass on the planet, that the meteorites come whizzing by and they sprinkle us with dust, that comets come by and we get water. And it's a well-known fact that when you build a sidewalk, you build it to the grade of the front yard. And yet if you go back 20 years later, and you can burn it with a torch, and I have, but the dirt is maybe an inch higher than the sidewalk. Well, where did that dirt come from? Someplace. You know, and that's a plain, simple fact. Anybody can see and try that for themselves. So I forgave him. And I picked his book up. And then I can't remember what the second thing was. But once again, I threw the book out, got away from it. And then I thought that over, and I decided, well, maybe he's right there. It's not that far-fetched. See, any new idea you hear is like, oh, that can't be true. And we're all like that. We reject before we really think or examine if it's not what we're used to hearing. And along about the third time, I either picked up or threw down the book, I'm not sure which, I said to myself, well, he makes his points, but I don't believe it. So I think as a little part-time hobby, I'm going to prove this man wrong. Because his major premise is that we are subject to recurrent cataclysms here on Earth. Tremendous ones, where the whole Earth tilts over. Well, the years went by, and it was always like, I wouldn't say a hobby, it wasn't an avocation, it was something to do when I had nothing else to do, or I happened to see something that related to it. I began to see more and more that this man was right, and that the only solution was his to the facts at hand. And that piqued my, that in conjunction with my inventing, got me into the engineering phases of a good many fields, and from there, of course, it's only a short hop and skip into the science behind it. Or would it be the engineering behind the science? Either way, I'm an omnivorous reader. I read anything in front of me, and through the years, I picked up quite a background in the hard sciences. So when I got onto this thing, I had already written a book on science called The Last Skeptic of Science. And so I had a good background there, and when I got on this thing and found that there were things too wrong, I guess you would say that I had been primed by a lifetime of other things to dissect this hoax, the hoax that NASA foisted upon us.
All right, good. Hold there.
These individuals weren't just skeptics. They were voices demanding transparency. Yet, instead of answers, they received silence. This isn't about conspiracy, it's about the right to question, to seek truth in the shadows of history. Where questions remain unanswered, the pursuit of truth continues.
Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
Please.
Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
I'm not trying to you tell him to get out of here.
This is a hotel.
We'll call the police. We pay. Come on in here. We'll call the police.
Solicit
You like that? Why don't you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon?
It doesn't, sir. I don't have nothing to do with this. But
Okay.
you cannot solicit on this property.
We just paid to rent out the penthouse to shoot up there. So.
You can't solicit like this. All right. Well, then I'd go through my measures.
Yeah.
You gotta keep shooting, man. Okay, well, you can put it on your shoulder. Don't be shy.
Come with me, Buzz.
You really like it, don't you?
You're the one who said you walked on the moon when you didn't. Calling the kettle black, if I ever thought of it. Saying I misrepresented myself.
Away from me.
You're a coward and a liar and a thief.
When asked to swear on the Bible that he walked on the moon, Buzz Aldrin responded not with words, but with a punch. Others who questioned the mission were ridiculed, discredited, or simply silenced.
Mr. Armstrong, Bart Sibrel, ABC Digital. Wanted to give you the opportunity to swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. Will you put your left hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Gentlemen. Mr. Seibel.
Yes? If you really walked on the moon, why would you not do that? So why don't you just put the end to the record in the argument and put your hand on the Bible, swear to God you walked on the moon.
Mr. Seibel, knowing you, that's probably a fake Bible.
Really? Well, no, it's a real Bible. You have the opportunity to have $5,000.
The meeting is not open.
Well, you have $5,000 cash. You can give it to charity if you swear on the Bible that you walked on the moon. I have a tape.
That'd be fine.
Why don't you swear to? Why not? Why won't you do it? So why don't you put your hand on the Bible and swear to God that you walked on the moon?
Mr. Seibel has made a fool of himself in front of the world. Mr. Seibel, you do not deserve answers.
I don't want to be presumptuous here. I can call you Buzz? Okay.
That's a legal name. Passport,
Okay.
driver's license.
And I am Uncle Coney tonight.
Uncle Coney.
Let's talk about this, because this is fascinating. I remember very clearly, I think anybody who was alive at the time does. I remember my parents waking me up, and we went down and we watched you guys land on the moon,
No,
which
you
was...
didn't. No, you didn't.
What?
Because there wasn't any television. There wasn't anybody taking a picture. You watched animation. See, you associated what you saw with...
I have very hazy memories.
Yeah, I know.
Well, no, but what we saw was we all were gathered around the old curved top radio and listened.
Talking about, you know, how many feet we were going to the left and right, and then I said, contact light, engine stop.
It was
and a few
exciting.
other things, and then Neil said, Houston, Tranquility Base, the Eagle has landed. Man, how about that?
That was very exciting.
Not a bad line.
Yeah. This was. So, were you self-conscious about all the? I mean, the entire Earth, you know, is watching and listening to everything that you guys do. Were you self-conscious at all about what am I going to say? What if I say something that's kind of stupid? It's in the history books forever, like, I want a cookie, or, you know.
You got it. You got it.
You're worried then.
We were focused. You know, I was afraid that Neil might say, hey, you better go out first and, you know, think up a couple of lines to say when you step on the moon.
Right. So that's a huge responsibility.
You
Now,
bet, right.
You were not the first man to walk on the moon, but you've actually talked about this. You were the first man to relieve himself on the moon. Is that true?
That is correct.
That is correct.
They tracked it. Every signal, every move, every frequency bouncing between Earth and the so-called moon. The Soviet Union, America's sworn rival in the most expensive pissing contest in history, the space race, had the tech, the scientists, and the motive to expose a lie. Yet they said nothing. No call-out. No accusation. Just silence. Why? Was it because they believed the mission was real? Or because they knew it wasn't and chose to look the other way? Was there a quiet agreement? A backroom detente between superpowers? You fake your moon landing. We fake our peaceful intentions. We both get to claim victory and keep our empires intact. Or maybe they stayed silent because the Apollo failure real or perceived benefited them more as a shadow than a scandal. A failed American moon mission could have triggered global embarrassment, economic panic, and a collapse of U.S. credibility. But a staged success? That was useful. That kept the money flowing, the arms race churning, the illusion of competition alive. And in the end, both sides won, just not the people, because when lies become policy and silence becomes loyalty, the truth becomes the first casualty of power. The moon landing is not just a story, it's a belief, a myth taught in textbooks, immortalized in monuments. But if it's a lie, what else have we accepted without question? We were told we touched the stars. Maybe we only touched the silver screen. Maybe we never left. Maybe we were watching history that never happened.